Welcome back, everyone, to Pokemon Platinum. We've left Filler Land, so it's time to get a move on some things again. Although I
So,
think this is technically optional.
you know what? We were talking about this a couple of parts ago. With a dungeon with a
Spinny
gimmick in it.
pads.
You know what? At least they're not as slow as the Gen 1 spinny pads. So,
Yeah, technically they're faster.
oh god. Trying to play Rocket Base in in GBC Gen 1 is probably one of the most painful experiences cuz
I played Gen 1 and 2 on the 3DS Virtual Console like last year, and yeah, aspects of that game are very painful today.
it's just they're just old
Yeah.
is the big problem. Um I feel like Gen 1 get cuz it's still amazing how good of a sequel Gen 2 on GBC really is and how just straight up better everything is in so many ways in Gen 2. But Gen 1 in particular, when Fire Red and Leaf Green exist, it is so hard to go back to the original version of that game sometimes with, the weird sprites and well, I guess if you're playing yellow, the sprites aren't
Are
that bad.
okay.
Yeah. They actually look like the Pokemon they're supposed to represent, so,
Call me crazy, but I really don't like playing Pokemon Yellow.
I can understand that because the game kind of gives you too many good Pokemon in a sense. Because
You have all three starters.
yeah, the game wants it to make it so that you can like be Ash basically, which okay, fine, but it just means that you have access to a super overpowered team and you can basically wipe the floor with
And Ash still lost.
Oh, I just find it funny that they ended up redesigning the Cerulean Underground Cave like 3 different times.
I
And
like
so yellow, red, and green, yellow, blue, and green all have different versions of it.
I like how half the theming in the Pokemon anime is, hey, these things that you do that you do a lot of in the games are kind of shitty. uh, so you should feel bad because our main character feels bad about
Well, too bad. Ash is just wrong.
them.
I mean, the episode where he trades the Butterfree really did make me feel like trading Pokemon made me a bad person when I was a kid.
That's
And then you got over it.
that's it's kind of what I'm talking about. Is like when you transfer those mechanics into a setting where these Pokemon have feelings and you have feelings, and it's not just a video game. It
Yeah, cause
it's
yeah, you
it it does kind of make it a little bit skeevy.
it's like imagine if you talk to your best friend in elementary school and like, hey, want to trade dogs? It'd be like traumatizing to the dogs. But it's just a normal thing in Pokemon. Like I don't know. Like I guess so Pokemon Black and White, they is the whole like, oh, Pokemon like working with humans and fighting with humans. And like I guess I can kind of get that in a sort of way, like in that it makes them build camaraderie and stuff like that. So I can kind of get it, but still, many of the other ways that we treat Pokemon are kind of crap. Because like I don't know how in any situation you can make the Pokemon that you've made max friendliness and max happiness with just suddenly be okay with being traded to someone else.
Yeah,
It's
and that's that like for at least the first story in the Kanto region, I felt like the Pokemon anime was pretty good at exploring those themes in ways that might have been counter to the way these things are portrayed in game, but it was an interesting way to look at it.
the Gen 1 anime also had the benefit of not being tied down to so much source material, though,
Yeah.
because the only thing that existed was that base game, which, if you look at it for just what it was, it's pretty abstract in many ways.
Yeah.
So, there were blanks to fill in, but now that we're on, like, game 8, there aren't as many blanks left,
Yeah.
and so it feels stranger when that kind of stuff pops up. Like, but I mean, a lot of the frustrating stuff about the anime to me, at least as I remember from a kid, like for one, a lot of the episodes don't really matter. Although again, that could, I suppose, be considered a benefit if you prefer kind of a laid back slice of Pokemon world kind of design
I would
to
say
That's
the
just
anime.
that's just the nature of how the show was supposed to function.
Yeah, so that I guess is a personal thing. As a fan who wants to see Pokemon more frequently, it still irritates me how few Pokemon Ash actually uses and catches and stuff like that. And especially gives
it's
away,
like
which
it's like you're watching a show that follows one of the trainers on the routes rather than the main character.
yeah, it's because it's just like Ash has so many of these great Pokemon, like the Butterfree, the Haunter, the Primeape, the Charizard, and they all get thrown away, or like he catches interesting Pokemon like the Muck that he never uses and stuff,
Yeah.
and it's like, it would be neat to have the variety instead of using Pikachu and Bulbasaur every episode,
He had a perfect winning percentage Gudra and gave it away.
I can't believe that Pokemon never lost, though. It's like, ugh, Jesus.
And he gave it away.
I still hate Ash Greninja. I know that people will get upset.
Oh no, that is one of the dumbest things.
I know that it would be. I know that it's fairly standard to cast like semi-stupid, super enthusiastic and emotional shonen heroes in these shows, but it would be kind of nice to watch a Pokemon show about someone who's like really serious into the craft of Pokemon training.
That's actually where the manga has a strong point, because the Red is actually like an intelligent like trainer, and he has a varied team that he uses, and
he switches Pokemon in and out.
Yeah, I mean,
as
like
needed.
there are some like really interesting elements to the Pokemon game that could translate into really interesting elements of story and character. As a Pokemon trainer, for example, you need to know quite a lot of things to be at the top of your game. And if you were aiming for the championship, you would want to do that. And there are all sorts of mechanics in the series that translate into, interesting stuff for character and world building. You need to know the ins and outs of taking care of all these different animals. There's the breeding element, which is maybe
that's
a
actually-
little much
that-
for a kid's show, but still.
that is actually something that the manga does do, though, because every generation, each trainer specializes in something different. Like Red is, just a typical Pokemon fighter and stuff like that, but Crystal, for example, is all about like collecting and researching the Pokemon for Professor Oak. Like by the end of the Crystal series, she has caught every single Pokemon in the Johto Pokedex. But the punchline is that Oak doesn't have the heart to tell her that they discovered another 100 or so Pokemon from Ruby and Sapphire by the time she finishes. So he's just like, "Oh, good job, yeah. We're just not going to mention the Ruby and Sapphire Pokemon that just showed up to you right now. You can have your moment."
And it's funny, in the Ruby and Sapphire one, the guy's the one into like contests and stuff.
Oh, they do that?
Showmanship. I think it is.
Oh, okay.
I think Ruby's the one more interested in like showmanship than actual battling.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Like this is a completely different context and a completely different kind of story. But I was thinking about this because I recently read a book, and it has like very little to do with this because the book series is mostly about like werewolves, vampires, and monsters. But one of the books, a lot of most of the cast was involved in a horse farm, and it went into stuff like horse breeding, what people have to do to make money as selling and breeding horses in a modern market, and all of that stuff. And it was surprisingly interesting, and I say this as someone who doesn't give a shit about horses. So I was thinking about like what that kind of stuff might entail in a Pokemon setting. And what it came down to is you could write a story about a really deep into things trainer who knows the ins and outs of pretty much every aspect of Trainer Life,
so red and blue.
yeah, or more, probably in a more interesting direction, who knows enough to learn more as the adventure progresses, and then applies that knowledge as the adventure progresses.
Red and blue.
Red and blue, yeah, pretty much.
At least as far as the original Red and Blue manga goes.
I still need to read that manga. I had a big ass graphic novel volume of it once, but it didn't go very far in. It was good though.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, Red and Blue in the manga kind of switch the typical shonen tropes. Because, like, I mean, to a lesser extent, because Blue is the cocky, I'm just going to do whatever I want one, and Red is the one that kind of plans a little bit more, which is usually the opposite of most shonen stuff, where the kid who has the natural talent but doesn't, like, study or whatever is the main character,
Heroes
and the
don't
rival...
need plans.
And then the rival is the one who has, like, the intellect and studies, but he just can't beat him, and why? And
well, they're trying to appeal to the laid-back kid at school who thinks like they can make it through life by coasting.
And it's funny because.
Oh God, I hate him so much. Anyway,
you don't like the absurdity like.
Anyway,
it's funny because they're kind of their ways of doing it kind of get reversed as the manga goes on, where after Red wins, he kind of gets a little bit full of himself.
Yeah, and that's what leads to the beginning of Gold and Silver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Blue becomes the planner and the more detail-oriented one.
Which, makes sense, because that's typical of a lot of, like, rivalries and stuff where, in these kinds of things, where they pick up the traits of the other person in the
character
rivalry.
Growth, or in some places, character direction that might be troublesome in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, the Pokemon Adventures manga is a good read, for especially I have only read the Gen 1 and Gen 2 arcs. I
have read through 5. The problem is Viz has been releasing them purely in these Viz Kids.
Oh, those are the weird-shaped ones, right?
They're the weird-shaped ones that have, like, 2 to 3 chapters. They're like, yeah, they're only like $4 a piece, but they're about the length of a regular comic book.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I like reading manga volumes over comics.
It's like otherwise, it's like 1 through 5 they're releasing the traditional kind of tankobon size, which is really nice and convenient. And then they just kind of stopped when they got to X and Y.
Were they not selling well enough? That's sometimes a problem with mangas.
I have no idea, honestly.
I think maybe they wanted to have the manga appeal to the kid audience instead of just the older nerd audience in the West, maybe. But
that'd be the only thing I could understand, but at the same time, kids aren't buying comic books either, so...
No.
I don't really see... Oh, you know what? It's not the kids they're appealing to, it's the parents.
Yeah, because parents don't like to buy books, is the thing, because they're too expensive to get kids' books. So that's why the books... That's actually part of why a lot of books for kids these days, even if they're like meant for like a 7 or 8-year-old, and they're they have a lot of pictures in them, they're still kind of released shaped in the same kind of size and hardcover, like adult books, quote unquote. Like the best example I can think of is like the Captain Underpants books, if you remember from when you were a kid, are like pretty small. And, paperback and whatnot. The series that author does now is called Dogman. And instead, they're like these big, thicker hardcover volumes that are longer for sure. But I think it's just subconsciously, parents are more likely to spend more than $15 or $20 on a book if it looks like it is, quote unquote, it's big and fancy enough.
At the same time, that's a really stupid thing to do. Because speaking as a kid who completely, like, obliterated a copy of Order of the Phoenix to the point where it was falling apart and I had to buy a new one, giving kids hardcovers is not smart.
No. And I mean,
regarding back to Pokemon Adventures manga a little bit again, I'm also old enough to remember when Electric Tail of Pikachu was released as a traditional American comic book because they had to rearrange everything.
They had to, like, swap all the panels and stuff.
Wait, they didn't just flip it?
Yeah, they did. They flipped it and they rearranged it a little bit.
Huh.
It was also heavily censored because it was drawn by a hentai artist.
Huh.
Oh god.
Yeah, Misty is really overly sexualized in the Japanese version. It's really cringy.
Oh.
Uh,
You see,
Reminder: the Electric Tail of Pikachu also came out like right after the games came out
there's.
in Japan, so it had even less to work with.
You see, here's the thing. You say that, and I'm just like, what was wrong with Misty as she was? She was already kind of sexy.
I don't think the anime was even out at that point.
Yeah,
Oh.
because Misty, like, we don't really know how old Misty's supposed to be if we just take Gen 1 into consideration. Like, we have, like, teenager, question mark?
Yeah,
In
it's like
Gen 1, it's
somewhere,
like-
some
You get
based
out
on the sprite and how they treat her, it's like somewhere between 13 and 17-ish.
Yeah.
In Gen 1, it's like you graduate 8th grade, you're an adult, go out into the world. I
Yeah, it wasn't until the anime where they made her like, no, she's definitely like 12, 13.
You see, one thing I wonder is if the Pokemon trainers were always intended to be 10 years old, or if that was just something they said for the anime that everybody just took for granted. Because, like, again, like, one of the common jokes is like, oh, you let this 10-year-old stop this terrorist organization. And it's just like, what if they were always meant to be, like, 14? I mean, not that it's that much better to have a 14-year-old stop
It's
a
a
terrorist
little bit better, though.
organization. But at least, you know, them walking around on their own makes a little bit more sense.
I'm pretty sure it's ambiguous in the games because the
It's hard to tell. I do appreciate, that's another thing I appreciate about Black and White, where they're kind of definitively, no, they're like definitely 14,
well,
15.
it's kind of ambiguous on the protagonist in the game, but even so, there are little kids talking about their shorts out in the roots. So let that speak for itself.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, this is one of those things where you have to, like, let your imagination roam. Like, my idea was always that, like, they were, like, residents of the town over and they didn't, like, stray too far from
Yeah.
it. Was, like, I mean, that doesn't really make sense.
Shorts Boy was probably just like a resident of Pewter City, and that's just like a 10-minute walk for him.
I
Yeah,
mean, granted,
suppose.
there's, like, 15 people on that route, which is more than the entire population of Pewter City, and there's no houses for them, so I don't know where they live.
Public housing.
But you get the point, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It was always a representation of a city, not
yeah.
the actual city.
I just think that, like, in the Pokemon universe, parents can't wait to kick their kids out of the house to go on a Pokemon journey because it means they get the bedroom back.
Oh, hello,
It's the
hello there,
singular-
Ash.
the
Hello there,
singular
Ash. Is your mom still single? Here, here's a Pokedex and go travel the world.
Oh God.
Ash's mom does spend a lot of time traveling with Mr. Mime.
Mr. Mime is a part of the family. All right.
Mr. Mime is Ash's dad at this point.
Mr. Mime's a good dad. He helps out with the housework. All right. He's always sweeping off the porch. That's actually the only thing he does, but he helps. He's very committed to that singular job he has. But yeah, it's just funny because like they catch that Mr. Mime for Ash's mom like in a random filler episode at one point, and they just always remember to bring it back. And considering that this is the Pokemon anime where they sometimes forget certain stuff, like for example, oh, Ash leaves his Pidgeotto at Pallet Town. I'm gonna come back and visit you. Goes back
Never
to Pallet
again.
Town 6 times and
Oh,
never says hi.
are you poisoned?
Yeah.
I thought my video was glitching.
Nope.
Okay.
No, he's got. I mean, if he's going to be going to the Pokemon Center after
I
exploring
forgot.
anyway,
I
there's no
forgot.
point.
Pokemon was one of those games
Well,
that leaves poison after battle.
They stopped after a while.
Yeah.
I think they changed it. Oh yeah, this gen was the one that changed it where you don't die.
Faint, but you
Ah.
go to win it.
Oh, I forgot poison wore off after a certain number of steps too.
Well, that's new after this one. No, it stops after 1 HP from this point onward. For gens 1 through 3, it's just straight up KO.
I love how dark that message is, though. Ivy survived poisoning, like she was gonna die.
Oh, I mean, if it was a Nuzlocke, then they would have. But